Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video I have the latest from the live radar. From the latest UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the next 5 days, as we are at the start now of this August heat wave, which is not only going to last the next few days, but we have some strengthening views from the models today that it's going to continue through the end of the week, into the weekend, and potentially even into the start of next week, with many areas not getting below 28 degree threshold as said for the next 5 to 7 days, potentially even longer. We will see some respite at times. We see a bit of cloud, maybe a few showers and storms moving through, but generally speaking, pretty much every day for the next 7 days, somewhere we'll get up towards that 30-degree mark, or at least that's what the models are showing today. As we progress into the longer range, pretty much all the runs agree in a mid-August heat wave, lasting from today, potentially all the way through to around the 20th of August, where eventually we do see lower pressure moving in off the Atlantic. Some runs have that lower pressure being actually the remnants of an ex-tropical system, so it could go from one extreme to the other, from hot and very dry and pleasant heat wave conditions to potentially exceptionally unsettled conditions if that did occur. But of course, that is 10 days out, so there's a lot of uncertainty, but it is something we'll keep an eye on both today and over the coming days. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, which you like and subscribe. Now, if you start on the live radar, it doesn't actually look like we're at the start of a heat wave. There's actually quite extensive precipitation around across parts of southern and southwestern England, an area across northern England, and some across northern Scotland. Now, we expected the rain across northern Scotland. This was within most of the runs recently, so we knew there was going to be a bit of rain in the north, a little bit more delayed start to the heat wave for some parts of Scotland. We did know further southwards there would be a few odd showers as the very hot air arrived during this afternoon, but we didn't quite expect it to be this extensive. So it just shows you what happens when we get a bit of humidity, a bit of moisture, a little bit of instability. The precipitation can pep up quite a bit more than we thought, and that's exactly what's happened through this afternoon into the evening. It's pretty much built around a few hefty showers, which is said were forecasted across parts of northern England, and a few here across the far southwest, maybe a few heavy pulses moving into the London area. Elsewhere, though, it's all that thick cloud built around those showers is producing some precipitation. Now, I'm a bit sceptical that all of this is delivering rain, simply because when we've got very hot air masses around, we can see very high-level cloud producing some precipitation that doesn't quite get to the ground, so it does evaporate in the heat. So there is the possibility that that is occurring here, but definitely some quite heavy and even some thundery pulses out towards the southwest. Well, we've avoided this rain through the afternoon. Temperatures have been hot today, up towards those heatwave thresholds, widely 28 to 30 degrees across much of England and Wales. Not quite as warm across Scotland, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland here, more towards the low 20s or even mid-20s, but we're expecting those temperatures to rise in the next day or two as we do see the high pressure extend in for all. And I suspect actually for those northern areas, it could even be better later on this week once the high pressure really establishes itself further north, as we could see a second pulse of heat, and it could be even more widespread than what we've got through the next couple of days. Now, if we do over to net weather, we can see the top temperatures today. Again, ignore Lakenheath. We keep seeing that every time we look at the temperatures. It's always a couple of degrees higher than all the other weather stations. I suspect, again, it's got issues which, again, are not fixed. But you can see elsewhere, widely 29 to 31 degrees, 31 peaking in Northolt there. So pretty much in line with the forecast, which had 28 to 30 in most areas, as I said, peaking potentially at 31. So pretty much bang on today from the UKV. So yeah, in line with expectations. So tomorrow we are looking at a few degrees higher, 33, 34, maybe an isolated 35. You've probably backed off the possibility of reaching a 36, but I think a 35 is definitely in the realms of possibility. Now, if you look at the latest UKV, if we run through this afternoon, now I'm recording this just before 8 p.m, and look at the UKV here. We've got the rain across northern Scotland. We expected that. We've got a few showers across northern England. Again, we expected that, but again, they're quite a bit more extensive in reality. And then across southern areas, there's thicker cloud and some outbreaks of lighter rain. But we're actually seeing extensive lighter rain, a few heavier pulses, and the odd thunderstorm out there. So definitely a lot more activity than anticipated, and that's why in these sort of scenarios with a lot of energy around, very small subtle changes in the forecast in terms of the triggers, in terms of the instability, can create a whole host of problems. And of course this run only was generated a few hours ago, so this is latest data, and you can see it is getting the rain at the moment wrong. Beyond that, though, we do expect all of the cloud and rain to clear through this evening. So regardless of what happens with that cloud and rain, we do expect it to be gone by Tuesday morning, and we see a clear slot arriving as we head through the late morning of Tuesday into the afternoon. There's a few, again, odd showers in some of the thicker cloud across northern England, but generally speaking, the hottest areas, clear slots appearing, beautiful sunshine, but feeling, of course, exceptionally hot, very oppressive, temperatures widely into the low 30s, a few spots into the mid 30s. You can see it is warm and it is increasingly dry up and down the country during Tuesday into Wednesday. Of course, there are always the risk of a few odd showers around, but you can see into Wednesday, pretty bone dry for most, a few odd storms across southern parts of the Republic of Ireland and maybe northern Scotland. Wednesday cooling off a little bit in the far south. We see a bit of cloud moving in, but those central and northern areas, they're going to see the peak of the heat there during Wednesday afternoon. Again, 32, 33 degrees is definitely a possibility. Now into Thursday, we are going to see a little bit more cloud and a little bit more in the way of showers, but still 90% of places are going to be dry. It's just as a slight alteration in wind direction, slight westerly moving in, so slightly fresher air for a time. So expect the temperatures to drop slightly, but it's still going to remain around heatwave thresholds in some spots. Still thinking 29 or even 30 degrees, so similar temperatures to today in some spots. The same could be said for Friday, but where we got those clearer skies, temperatures could start to jump up again. And as we head into the weekend, we see another push from the south. Runs were warning about this over the past few days, but it's definitely come to fruition in the latest run today. And yeah, all the runs now showing a second burst of heat into the weekend, the start of next week. We thought it was a sort of bit of a 50-50 over the past couple of days, but definitely that hotter scenario has now taken over. And we can see that from the latest upper air temperatures. Very hot air moving through this evening. The real hottest air doesn't arrive until around late tomorrow morning into the early afternoon, and then through the evening the 20 ice firm does arrive. Maybe not getting towards the 21 or 22 degrees. That's why we backed off the possibility of a 36 or 37, but still very hot out there during Tuesday. Wednesday still very hot in many eastern areas and up towards northern areas, but you can see that cooler air moving in from the west, and that's going to move in for Thursday. Going to give slightly fresher conditions, but still above average, still potentially heat wave levels in the east. Friday though, look what happens. That cooler air is still here. We start to see hot air re-emerging from the south. Yes, might still only touch 30 degrees in some spots, might not be the widespread low 30s yet, but those southerly winds are starting to return, and then look what happens into Saturday. The real heat starts to push back in, and you're able to see the temperatures across southern and western areas already up towards the low 30s come Saturday. Expect it to escalate even further through Sunday and Monday as that heat really starts to reignite once again. Now, if you look at those 2 metre temperatures now, this afternoon, as forecasted, around 28 to 30 degrees, peaking at 31 in London. So really pretty bang on there from the UKV. Into Tuesday, temperatures are going to peak even higher. 33 to 35 degrees is the top temperature. Again, a localised 36 is possible, but I think it's a slightly lower chance than we had over the past day or so. So we'll have to wait and see whether we see a 36, but definitely 33, 34 is looking quite widespread. Very hot evening there into Wednesday morning. Temperatures really struggling to drop below 20 degrees in many inland areas. And you see into Wednesday, the heat's still there, transition slightly further northwards and eastwards, but still widely 28 to 34 degrees across parts of the northeast. So really hot there, and even 30 degrees towards the central belt of Scotland. Again, this heat could extend further southwards and westwards, again, depending on the timing of that westerly breeze that starts to move in and any cloud. But generally speaking, still a very hot day in the midst of this heat wave. Into Thursday, temperatures are going to remain very warm. You see most areas dropping more towards the mid-20s, but again, still touching the high 20s, 28 to 30 degrees in the far east. Again, still hitting those heat wave thresholds. So cooling down slightly on Thursday, but still remaining very hot in some spots. into Friday, temperatures will start to jump up once again. Look at this, 28 to 31 degrees, maybe even a couple of 32s out there. So already by Friday starting to escalate, and into Saturday starting to get higher further westwards, 28 to 31, as that real heat starts to build in. I suspect those low 30s will come widespread once again during Sunday and Monday, as we do start to see, of course, that hotter air reigniting from the southwest. Now we can see all of this put together on the latest GFS. High pressure and control with a southerly wind at the moment. Slight westerly flow during Wednesday, but that low doesn't push through and it sinks southwards, which allows another southerly push to arrive with an even stronger area of high pressure come the weekend. And you can see slightly fresher air for a time. Hot air never goes far away. And then we see that southerly push emerging again. And look at that, the 20 firm pushes in for many southern areas there during Monday, Tuesday, maybe later on next week around Wednesday, Thursday. It starts to subside with a bit of a westerly flow. And then look at the west. Look at that ex-tropical system coming in off the Atlantic, potentially giving very unsettled conditions there towards the latter portion of August. Again, that could cause some real issues if that did come off with some strong winds, heavy rain, of course, with a lot of humid air wrapped in amongst it. But out until around the 20th, so in around 8-9 days time, we are expecting it to remain very warm. Heat wave levels in many areas, especially across England and Wales, and real no end in sight or immediate end in sight to this heat, at least for the next sort of 7 days or so. If you look at the latest GM, it's broadly very similar. The high pressure and control with the southerly wind. That low tries to push in, but clears out to our south. And our west, high pressure pushes back in. And again, a southerly flow in amongst this, with the hottest air drifting in from the south. And look at that, the 15-degree firm completely taking over next Tuesday. Again, not expecting high 30s or anything ridiculous like that, but definitely mid to low 30s is a possibility. And then out towards day 10, we stay in that heat. And even out to next Thursday, we are still insanely hot. And again, if we zoom in, have a look at those max temperatures, see widely mid to high 20s, low 30s, definitely a real possibility here. Of course, we're looking at the midday temperatures, not the 3 p.m. temperatures, where it would be a good 3 or 4 degrees higher. So, yeah, definitely heatwave levels pretty much every day on this latest GM, all the way out to day 10. Pretty ridiculous conditions, I must say. Now, if you look finally at the latest ECMWF, this is just running as we're recording this. Again, high pressure in control. Those southerly winds pushing in. Low pressure clears out to our southwest after a temporary little push in there later on this week. And then look at this, high pressure slap bang over the top of us. That's the biggest shift. A lot of runs still kept it reasonably warm and hot, but had low pressure involved. Runs today, no low pressure in sight, and you can see it stays hot and dry for eventually that high starts to break down and potentially some slightly lower pressure moves in there around day 10, but stays very hot and dry all the way out to next Tuesday, Wednesday, before it starts to slowly break down. Now, to finish by looking at the latest ensembles, these of course have just run as well. Upper air temperatures escalating over the next 24 hours, peaking around the 18 to 20 degree range. You can see it does drop a little bit through Wednesday, Thursday, down towards only 3 to 5 degrees above average, so still hot, and then it returns to very hot conditions as we head later on into the weekend and into the start of next week. Still, though, uncertainty about how hot will it get. Will it stay around the 15-degree isotherm, which would be kind of peaks around the 30-degree range, or will we get back towards the 20-degree isotherm, which does bring in the prospect of mid-30s once again. And off the back of some very hot days preceding it, we could push 36, 37 degrees. That's a possibility. But as I said, around the 20th, 21st, strong consensus within the runs of slightly unsettled conditions and for cooler temperatures to move back in. Still hovering slightly above average, so it's not like it's going to be a cold northerly wind, but definitely a more fresher Atlantic air mass trying to nudge in. So yeah, hot heatwave conditions for the next week, potentially as long as 10 days, and then it does start to subside. Sea level pressure, generally high pressure later on into the weekend. So yes, a few showers are possible over the next few days, but definitely looking pretty bone dry over the weekend before low pressure does re-emerge. And if we look at the 2 meter dew points, look at this, really high dew points for the foreseeable future, around the mid-teens. So again, regardless of whether you got a bit of rain, a bit of cloud or sunshine, it's going to feel stuffy. Again, not quite ridiculous level of dew points. Sometimes we can get up towards the high teens, which really feels sticky, but we are seeing dew points here around the 14-15 degree range, which, yeah, as said, would still be very, very warm out there. 2 meter temperatures, pretty much all runs here from midday to 6 p.m. Of course, these predictions are, so not hitting 3 p.m. are touching 30 degrees, so expecting low 30s pretty consistently over the next few days for a bit of a tail off there into late August. And to finish by having a look at the latest ECMWF, it's very, very similar. Very warm over the next couple of days, a drop off, and then another peak in heat as we head into the weekend and start of next week. And you see the operational run from midnight run got towards the 20 degree firm before dropping off. So very much in line with the GFS, slightly cooler through Thursday, Friday, but with the residual heat, suspect it still gets to 30 degrees in a couple of spots. And then the heat does return with another real big blast, potentially more widespread and drier blast for all areas there as we head into the weekend. So mate, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you stay safe out there over the next few days. I know there's been some heat health alerts out, so do make sure you abide by those warnings. It is going to be very hot. I don't think the sort of peak heat is anything compared to what we have seen in some past summers, where we've got up towards, of course, 40 degrees or high 30s. We're not quite getting to that range. It's going to be low to mid 30s at the hottest points, but it's the relentless nature of this heat. It's going to be not just a few days, not 2 or 3 days of peak heat like we saw in 2022 when we got up towards 40 degrees. That was 2 or 3 day events before it did tail off. This could be 7, 8, 9, or even 10 days, dare I say. So it is the relentless nature which is going to be dangerous with this. So do stay safe, and I'll see you again for another video soon.